Hi, this is Teddy.
Hi, this is Arthur.
And you're listening to Steve Deline of the New Conversation Initiative on Two Broads Talking Politics, part of the Demcast Podcast Network. Bye-bye.
Goodbye.
Hey everyone, this is Kelly with Two Broads Talking Politics, and I am joined today by Steve Deline with the New Conversation Initiative. And Steve is a longtime organizer in deep canvassing. So hi, Steve.
Hi, Kelly. Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and I'm super excited. I had told our listeners that there would be lots of follow-up from my trip to Netroots, and your session that you did on deep canvassing was one of my very favorite things at Netroots. Don't tell anyone else I said that. So I'm super excited to get a chance to follow up with you about it.
Great. Yeah, I'm honored to hear that it was a highlight.
Yeah. So maybe just to start, we can sort of dig into a bunch of other things, but could you talk a little bit about what deep canvassing is and how you got started in this work?
Yeah. I mean, so deep canvassing is really just a way of talking to voters face-to-face or on the phone, a way of doing voter contact work that is a little different from the way that campaigns often approach that kind of field work. And it really grew out of, honestly, a place of desperation for the LGBT rights movement. You know, post Proposition 8 in California in 2008, which was the big ballot initiative on gay marriage that we lost, there was a real sense of despair that we had 28 straight losses, I believe, at that point on gay marriage across the country, not a single win at the ballot box. And it was kind of a feeling of if we can't win in California, if we can't even win in LA County and other places that we think of, as progressive strongholds, what hope do we have? And, we've made progress in the courts and in other places, but there was this real sense of a roadblock in the hearts and minds of our fellow citizens. And I was just, I was not a very political person at the time. I was just a gay guy who really felt that loss really profoundly and found myself being politicized in a way that I had not been in before, and felt myself being very angry and upset that my fellow Californians could have voted against my love and my life. And the only thing that made me feel better was going out to join this experimental project as a volunteer of folks going door to door to talk to the people who voted against us, to see if there was anything we could do to see if there was room to have a conversation, see if we could better come to understand one another, and see if there was anything we could do to change their minds. And it was really an incredibly grassroots, trial and error sort of thing of this group of volunteers and a small, hardy staff of amazing organizers going out week after week to talk to people and learn how to talk to people. And over time, what emerged, through trying a lot of things that didn't work, was a way to talk to people that seemed to be really productive and seemed to be causing us to understand each other in a different way and seemed to be moving people towards us on the issue of gay marriage in a really profound way. And so that became kind of a conversation model that was picked up by the larger LGBT rights movement and has since been applied in other movements and other spaces where we're facing challenges around deeper attitudes that we need to wrestle with that are standing in our way as progressives, and also a need to better understand people and connect with people who we're not understanding and connecting with. And it kind of has become known as this thing called deep canvassing.
So I think part of what drew me so much to what you were talking about is so many people right now, I think, have the impression that you can't change anybody's minds, that, we're very polarized in this country, and that there's people on that side who think something and I'm on this other side and think something else, and we're just never going to be able to communicate, never going to be able to change each other's minds. But what you're saying is that there are ways of approaching these conversations where you can change minds. What do you think are some of the keys to actually being able to do that, to make that kind of connection?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is what we kind of live day in and day out is, asking ourselves that question and trying to answer it for big groups of people that are wanting to bridge that exact kind of divide that you're talking about that we all feel so strongly right now. And we've learned that, and we've now got research to back up that the keys really are, the biggest thing is listening to people. The biggest thing is not treating what we have to say when we approach someone who we don't agree with on everything. Not treating what we have to say is the most important thing. The facts, the statistics, the information that we have as being the key that if we can just transfer our knowledge into their brain, they will suddenly see things the way we do, and that should be all that's necessary. And I think
a Vulcan mind meld.
Yeah, exactly. And I think as progressives, we often do fall into a little bit of a habit of thinking that way, that we just have the better information, the better, we lament this kind of post-truth, post-fact era, but at the same time, I think also put a little too much stock in our facts and our knowledge and our information. And what we've really learned is that if we want to change someone's mind, it's really about giving them the space to think about and process what they believe and what they've experienced in their life that kind of has led them to the beliefs and stances that they have politically. Giving them a chance to kind of process things and tell their stories and share how an issue makes them feel and kind of dig through the emotional backlog of what has led them to that place, and just kind of be a partner with them in doing that and giving them a chance to kind of stand back and reflect on their own feelings and stories and beliefs and say, okay, I can kind of see how I got here, but maybe when I really think about, what this has all meant for me, I kind of compare my emotions to this kind of political stance I've taken on, things don't quite match up the way I thought they did. Really giving the space for people to process and giving them, and what that really takes from us is being curious about people and really being interested in what they've experienced and the path they've walked, and what's led them to where they stand, and giving them kind of a non-judgmental space to talk about that and giving them some vulnerability from ourselves, sharing a little bit about ourselves and our own life so that they suddenly feel comfortable sharing a little bit vulnerably with a stranger that they just met on their door, and kind of creating space for us to be humans together and process on that level instead of kind of shouting across a divide.
How long do these conversations take?
We, on average, an average deep canvas conversation on most issues that we've measured that on has taken 12 minutes has usually been the ultimate mean average. They can run anywhere from 10 minutes to 20 minutes, I'd say, is the usual range.
So I think, one of the questions then that people have about that is it worth taking that extra time? So you mentioned this is different than sort of the typical canvassing that campaigns do, which is often, no more than 3 minutes at a door or something. And so how do you find the time to have these longer conversations with people, and how do you decide that it's worth it to do that?
So part of it is a question of what we are using, who we are, really trying to reach, because we can spend 3 minutes on the doors identifying our supporters, finding the people who are in our base and asking them to turn out to vote, reminding them to where their polling place is, doing kind of a range of get out the vote practices that we know have a lot of value. And so that kind of canvassing, when motivating our base of voters who are, medium to likely to vote already, when that's what we needed to do, that has tremendous value. But we face a lot of situations in our politics right now where preaching to the choir, speaking to our base is not enough, where we have to reach outside of our circle and talk to people who are feeling conflicted, or talk to people who aren't with us and actually see themselves as in opposition to us. There are just a lot of situations we face. And I think, the 2016 election is an unfortunate case in point, where we're really in trouble if we don't have the ability to do that work and reach outside of our circle. So there's a question of, what the goal overall. But then, when that is what we're trying to do, the research shows that basically a 3-minute conversation doesn't have an impact. We've tried variations on kind of stripping the deep canvas approach down to its bare minimum and only spending 3 minutes on the door with people who we're not on the same side with. And we've now got really hard research to show that those interactions just don't make an impact on people. They don't do anything to persuade people. And similarly, there's a lot of research that shows that all of our attempts to persuade across the kind of political gamut, from TV ads to mailers to radio ads to, speeches and town halls, all the things that we generally do to try to persuade people, don't make an impact. Or if they do make an impact, they make an impact that lasts a day or two. And the extraordinary thing about a deep canvas conversation is that on multiple issues now, these persuasive impacts, whether it's on immigration or LGBT rights or abortion access, have been found to change people's minds for 9 months or longer, which is as long as researchers have been able to study. So, the trade-off of a 3-minute conversation that makes no impact versus a 12-minute conversation that makes at least a 9-month impact and maybe a permanent impact. When you dig into kind of the return on investment of investing in either of those two things, the math starts working out pretty well in favor of doing having those deeper conversation and taking that extra 9 minutes at the doors.
Do you think that there are people who are unpersuadable? Do you have ways of sort of identifying this is a person who is worth having a longer conversation with versus someone who is not going to hear you no matter what?
Absolutely, yeah. No, it's of course true that not everyone is persuadable, that not everyone is interested in engaging in dialogue. And, it's interesting, when we ask people our conversations start by us asking folks to rate themselves often on a 0 to 10 scale on the issue we're interested in, where 0 is they're totally not with us and 10 is they're very strongly with us. And interestingly, the biggest predictor of whether people are worth engaging with has nothing to do with where they put themselves on that scale. There are people who say they're a 5 on that scale and they're kind of undecided, but who are really going to struggle to talk to. And there are people who start out as a 0 on that scale and are like, couldn't feel more strongly that they're against us, who end up being really worthwhile talking to. So it's less their kind of how far away from us they are in their politics, and it's a lot more about, whether they're willing to just engage in kind of a human conversation, whether they're willing to, take a few minutes and say, oh yeah, let me share a little bit about my life, and I'm interested to hear about your life, and whether they're kind of willing to share stories and be a little vulnerable and take the time to have an interaction that's not just, regurgitating our talking points and their talking points. That's the best barometer of when we should be staying at a door or not.
This seems like it would be a lot more difficult to train people to do this kind of work than the sort of traditional canvassing, where often you get sort of no training. You show up and they hand you a packet and there's like 2 lines of script and you're like, okay, that's what I'm going to go do. So how do you train people to do this kind of work?
There is a bit of investment that we've learned you want to make in training, and it's not as much as you think. So the research that political scientists have done into the impact of this tactic has found that even first-time canvassers going out and, doing a pretty imperfect job and feeling like they're still figuring it out and, they're missing as much as they're hitting, even those folks are still making a really big persuasive impact on voters. So perfection and expertise is not required to be able to do this well. It's more the desire and the willingness to give it a try that almost makes the most impact. And that said, our trainings usually last about an hour and a half to an hour 45 minutes before folks go out to the doors. And their trainings are really, getting people familiar with the script, but more than anything, just really kind of redirecting folks away from the idea that our job is to go to the doors and teach people or, make an argument or tell people what they should think. And that instead our job is to go to the door and be curious about people and ask questions. And our script is honestly mostly questions, and our training is mostly about, how do you kind of step into that space with confidence where you're going to be curious about people and share a little vulnerably about yourself. And how do you do a good enough job of kind of shutting down your own nervous mental internal monologue and listening when the conversation starts. So it's really about the skills of listening and being vulnerable more than anything else. So yeah, it's a little bit of an investment in training. And once people do it, the experience, volunteers often have is really transformative. And the feeling of being able to bridge this gap and this polarization that we're all feeling is so palpable and powerful for so many people who give this a try. They really want to do it again. They come back, and the training investment becomes less, obviously, the time they come back, and they start training the people around them. And there's kind of there's an opportunity to scale and have folks support one another in this really beautiful way once you've planted that seed of we're going to listen.
Do you find that people who have gone through the training and who have done this find ways to talk to their own friends and family then? That seems like one of the really valuable pieces, is that people don't know how to connect at the Thanksgiving dinner table with, Uncle Tom that they only see once a year who has very different beliefs. Does it translate at all to those kind of conversations?
Yeah, I think it absolutely does. And what surprised me, I know, was when I started having these conversations, the first time I did it, it seemed so intimidating. As a gay guy, again, talking to people about gay marriage and something that impacted me so profoundly, and knowing that I was going to talk to people who were carrying some homophobia and weren't necessarily with me, it was so scary to go to people at the door. And then I quickly realized thereafter that even that was a lot easier than talking to the people in my own life who I hadn't had conversations about, because the stakes were so much lower at the door. You're never going to see this person again. You're not going to have to see them at Thanksgiving dinner, like you said, and you're not worried about kind of the long-term consequences for your relationship. So it's a great opportunity to practice before having to have the conversation with someone in your life who you're really struggling to communicate with and to understand and have understand you on a deeper level. So there was actually a team in Maine, Planned Parenthood of Northern New England, has done some amazing work over the last few years, developing a deep canvas model to persuade around abortion access. And one of the things that they very specifically studied when they worked with some political scientists to measure their impact was not only the impact on voters, but the impact on the volunteers who were coming to do the work. And there was a very strong result around the volunteers saying that they are now having conversations about abortion and sharing their own abortion experiences if they have them, and just talking about the issue with a wide array of people in their lives, whereas before they, would barely be willing to say the word abortion out loud because it was so stigmatized, because they felt so much stigma and because of the impact of, misogyny in our culture. So yeah, I think it opens up a really big space for dialogue in our own lives too.
You've mentioned a few times the kind of research that's been done. Are there things that you still want to know, things that the research hasn't yet been able to determine, or things that you hope that future research will be able to help determine?
Yeah, absolutely. We are still working on a bunch of research projects right now, actually, to kind of continue to disassemble and reassemble the act of deep canvassing, to really understand which pieces of it are the pieces that are key and impactful and essential, and which are the pieces that can be swapped in and out or adjusted as people are finding new ways to adapt the tactic and take it on. So we have lots of questions that we're digging into around kind of what makes deep canvassing tick, what's going on psychologically and emotionally for people, and we're learning more about that every day, hopefully in a way that, the progressive movement will really be able to use to continue having a different kind of conversation with folks moving forward and make a different persuasive impact. And, we're still testing so far, lots of successful tests, and we're testing, can deep canvassing have an impact on people's attitudes towards incarceration? Can deep canvassing make an impact on people's feelings about climate change and different actions that, we're hoping people will take around climate change? So we're kind of still extending and researching its impact in different issue areas as well.
We've mostly been talking about issue areas. Do you think that deep canvassing can work with candidate campaigns as well?
Yeah, absolutely. There's yet to be kind of a formal, rigorous study of that, but there have been some projects that have already happened. In 2018, there was a really exciting project where a team called Changing the Conversation Together out of Brooklyn did some deep canvassing work around candidate choice in Staten Island. And there's some really exciting early evidence about the impact that they had going to folks that were leaning Republican or undecided, and trying to see if they might consider voting for a Democrat instead. So yeah, there's some very exciting early evidence on that front.
So what is the new conversation initiative then, and what's sort of the plan with all of this moving forward?
The new conversation initiative is we're really a team of folks who, we're part of the team that created deep canvassing within the LGBT rights space. And our goal is really to, wherever there are folks that are hand raising in the movement more broadly, saying we want to use this tool, we want to adapt it to our circumstances, we want to learn how we can use this around our issue and in our movement. We're really partnering and working intensively side by side with those organizers and executive directors and program leads and campaign managers and field managers on the ground to help them implement this, because it's this kind of thing that grew in the LGBT rights movement, and then the only way to really learn how to do it was to come to one of our canvases and to see it at work on the ground in place. And we're really trying to go to folks to where they're using it in the world and help them do that. And we've had some really success. We've had some huge success in the last few months around immigration and persuading people on immigration policy in some really tough spots where there's not a lot of support for immigrants, and where people have really strong feelings about this, and changing and reducing prejudice towards undocumented people. We've had some huge success in that space, some climate justice projects. And I would say that our long-term goal is that we can change how the progressive movement approaches people who don't already agree with us, and that we can really broaden the base of folks that are in our tent, instead of just feeling like we face this choice of, are we going to appeal to the people who are already with us, or are we going to try to appeal to working class white men in the Rust Belt? Or, this kind of what I think is a false dialogue we are often having in the Democratic Party and in the progressive movement more broadly. I really believe that we can do both, that if we go to folks who don't already necessarily agree with us or vote with us, but say, hey, here's me, here's who I am, here's what I believe, here's what I've lived, and this is what's really important to me, and why I see things and want the things that I want and believe the things that I believe, and not hide any part of ourselves in what we want, but also then say, and I'm really interested in you and the path you've walked, and what you believe and why and your story. And then just that if we can do that as a larger movement, we have this enormous opportunity to to shift our ability to combat fear and racism and prejudice and win over the hearts and minds of folks that, just like us, are grappling with a lot of complicated feelings about a lot of tough issues.
So I imagine by this point, all of our listeners are like, okay, yes, I'm sold. I want to do this. So what should they do next? Who should they get in touch with? What would you encourage for people who are definitely excited by this model?
Yeah, I'm honestly, we're in a place where we're still trying to develop a better answer to this question, because we've been so busy helping build out programs in different states and different issues. And, so there are all these exciting projects that have sprung up, but we don't yet have kind of, hey, you want a deep canvas in your neighborhood and start from scratch? Here's how to get started. We kind of don't have a deep canvas in a box yet. And I think that's partly because there's a deeper piece of learning that we need to share with people that is a little tricky to figure out how to share. And it is more than just like reading a how-to. And we just haven't had the time to think about how to put that together, even though it's one of the things we're excited about. So long story short, if people are excited, I would encourage them to reach out with us. They can jump on our website. It's pretty bare bones, but it's designed to give people a way to reach us, and they can reach out to us on there and let us know what they're excited about and what they're thinking about. And if there's a deep canvas program in their area, because they're now all over the country, we can get them plugged in with someone who's already doing this work and they could learn from or join up with. And also, we're just glad to support anyone who's trying to launch a project in whatever way we can.
Awesome. Is there anything else that you wanted to make sure we talk about?
Yeah, I'm really excited about having this opportunity in the world to reach out to folks that, like I said before, are feeling this kind of range of conflicting emotions and are kind of in this world of cognitive dissonance that honestly I think we all are in as human beings and in politics, and kind of shed this sense of like this side, that side, and build this sense of, hey, this is what's deeply important to me, and this is the places I feel complicated, and this is the places that I feel angry and afraid, and let's talk about them instead of pretending like we can't talk, being so afraid to talk about them with each other because we're afraid that they're only going to push us apart. But having those conversations can actually bring us together. So I just appreciate the chance to chat with you all about this and your listeners.
Well, thank you so much, Steve. Like I said, that I just loved the session that you did on this, and I find it so hopeful and exciting that we can talk to people. You know, I've been saying for a while, like I think the way that we get people is not, you know, by shouting at each other on Facebook, but by talking. But it's hard to figure out what that model is. So I'm so excited that there is a model and that we can all work on being able to hear and be present for each other.
Yeah, and if I could, we're excited to find ways to have this conversation on Facebook too. But for now, my advice is just stay off the thing.
Or at least don't try to have those kind of conversations.
Exactly. Yeah.
All right. Well, Steve, thank you so much. This has been really great. And I hope we can stay in touch as you guys figure out ways to bring this model to more people and that this can really change the world.
Thanks, Kelly. I look forward to talking more down the road.
Thanks for listening to Two Broads Talking Politics. Our theme song is called Are You Listening? Off of the album Elephant Shaped Trees by the band Immunuri, and we're using it with permission of the band. Our logo and other original artwork is by Matthew Weflin and was created for use by this podcast.